All right, we're going to get started. Thanks for coming out for our Earth Day activities today. Just to let you know that immediately following this talk, there will be a common hour event in the bird sanctuary where we have, well, most importantly, we have snacks and a chance to visit the bird sanctuary. How many people have been in the bird sanctuary before? Not that many, right? So this is one of Hofstra's hidden gems. For really stupid reasons that we have no control over, it's usually kept locked. So this is your opportunity to check it out. It's a really beautiful place. To get to the bird sanctuary, all you have to do is cross over the Unispan and then walk over by the main entrance to the campus where the university club is. And the bird sanctuary is just at the entrance is at the back of the parking lot next to the university club. So it's really easy to find. Wander over. We have some speakers from campus who are going to be talking about what's gone on in the last year to promote campus sustainability. So we have the director of grounds talking about the work that they're doing to plant trees, plant native pollinator gardens, and things like that. We have and a few other people who are going to talk about different aspects of sustainability on campus. So again, that's during Common Hour. So pretty much after this is done. If you get over to the entrance to the bird sanctuary and it looks like it's locked, it's not really locked. The lock isn't locked, so you can just go right in. Wander around, check it out, and we'll be over there shortly if we're not already there. So that's happening during Common Hour, and then at 2:40 back in this room, there's a panel discussion on climate protesting and climate change activism. So we have some students and faculty who are going to be talking about how to, be effective lobbyists for climate change action. All right, so let's move on to our program for the next hour or so. So my name, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Dr. Brett Bennington, and I'm the chair of the Department of Geology, Environment, and Sustainability on campus. And I'm one of the people who's usually involved in organizing Earth Day activities for obvious reasons. And it's my great pleasure to be hosting this particular event and welcoming to campus Mr. John Turner. John is kind of a legend on Long Island, in my opinion. He's a lifelong conservation leader. If you've ever heard of the Pine Barrens and the tremendous effort that went on to preserve the Pine Barrens, to basically take this 100,000 acre area of wild land on eastern Long Island and prevent it from being developed. John was one of the founding members of that effort. He's a co-founder of the Long Island Pine Barrens Society, and you were in high school when you got involved in that, I think, which was just a few years ago, right?
Never too young to start being active.
Straight from the man. John is currently serving as a conservation policy advocate at the Seatuck Environmental Association, which he'll talk a little bit about, where he's involved in a number of projects around Long Island that seek to protect and restore our natural spaces and our wildlife. He's more knowledgeable about Long Island's natural history than anyone I have ever met, and he shares this knowledge very generously with teachers, students, and the public. He runs field trips. He has a blog called Nature Matters, which you can Google and find that online. He's the author of a book, Exploring the Other Island, a seasonal nature guide to Long Island, a seasonal nature guide to Long Island, and a children's book called Whalen's Wandering Drop about the water cycle. As a lifelong birder, John is passionate about protecting birds, which are struggling to survive in our built environments. Birds are under threat from habitat loss, from declining food sources, house cats, and window strikes on our buildings. And that is the topic of his talk today. So please give a warm welcome to John Turner.
Thank you, Dr. Bennington, for that overly kind introduction. So I wanted to just quickly kind of run through a little bit about the Seatuck Environmental Association. You see the icon down in the corner here, and you may wonder, well, I've not heard about that organization. What does it do? And then we'll launch into a discussion about window bird strikes, which is, again, one of the kind of signature programs that Seatuck is focusing on. So Seatuck got its beginnings in the mid to late 1980s, and at that time, pretty much the sole focus of the organization was to try to identify and protect what we call colonial waterbird sites. That is places where black skimmers and common terns and least terns, other seabirds that nest along Long Island's coastal habitats are found, because we humans love using beaches and love walking along the shore, and has put us into conflict with these birds, and the result being that many of these birds have declined, some cases precipitously. And then over the years, Seatuck's evolved to be involved in a lot of other issues. And I guess the takeaway message to you about Seatuck is that it is a island-wide wildlife conservation organization. Pretty much every type of wildlife, be it reptiles, amphibians, birds, insects, and fish, and mammals, we have some involvement in. It's really an exciting place to work. I've had the great pleasure of working for Seatuck for about 6 years now in a part-time capacity, and my areas of responsibility include trying to advance strategies to protect horseshoe crabs, diamondback terrapins, issue of the window bird strikes, and then one kind of habitat issue, and that is dealing with water quality, trying to promote the more extensive use of water reuse as a concept, where water from a sewage treatment plant is not discharged back into the ground or to the coastal waters around Long Island, but is, again, as the name suggests, is reused for some worthwhile purpose. Most notably on Long Island for irrigating either agricultural crops or golf courses. And there is one such facility, and we've been promoting the idea of wanting to see water reuse embraced much, much more widely on Long Island. 2-second tangent, you may know this with Dr. Bennington's work, obviously being an expert on Long Island's hydrogeology, is that Long Island's water supply that you depend upon for the coffee you had this morning, or tea, brushed your teeth, showered, whatever, comes from aquifers beneath our feet. And we've got 2.7 million Long Islanders that live, work, and play over that water supply. And so it's a pretty vulnerable resource. And it's a real challenge to try to keep it pure. It's also a challenge to make sure that there's an adequate amount of water for all Long Islanders. So water reuse, we believe, is one strategy that should be more widely employed to try to meet the challenge. So in 10 years, when you want to make coffee, that you have this, turn on the tap, you've got high quality and enough water to make that coffee you enjoy. You can tell I really would like a cup of coffee right now. Anyway, so okay, we're going to focus now. I can pull this out actually, right, and come around. I think I may have to do this just to see. So anyway, you can see the title, Reflections on a Transparent Problem, Bird Window Strikes. I like to characterize this issue as the most significant wildlife problem that nobody knows anything about. And you'll see the magnitude of it in a second. And just by a show of hands, can you tell? Have you ever heard of the issue before about it? Okay. How about if you haven't? Okay, good. You're the target audience, actually. Those that did. So, but no, everybody is. And so this issue has been kind of bubbling more rapidly to the surface and more aggressively over the past couple of decades as more and more people find out about it and really are upset by it. You see those dead birds, and that is put there to really demonstrate a few things. One is that it almost doesn't matter what group of birds. It could be a bird of prey, like in the lower left-hand corner, a Cooper's hawk, or it could be a woodpecker in the upper left-hand corner, or it could be a songbird of the other three. They don't see windows for what they are, just like we often don't. You want to get a little bit of amusement tonight, go into YouTube and just type in people walking into glass. Now, we're smart, right? And yet we walk into glass all the time, and you'll see the video after video of people that have recorded that. So anyway, so birds unfortunately do that routinely, and I want to just cover that issue to some extent with you. Because of that, you know, is that in color? Are you seeing? I've got bright color orange birds that are brightly colored here, and that looks like it's black and white to me. Are you seeing black and white or color? Oh. I was wondering if the first slide is, I remember the little red blood dripping out of the poor birds. I can't hear you, what? Okay. Because I've got a Mac, apparently the projector isn't able to translate that to color. So I apologize. These are really some very beautiful, colorful slides. If you know your birds, you know that that's a pair of male northern or Baltimore Orioles that are squabbling probably over territory somewhere in eastern North America. And the reason I put this up was to merely suggest that, you can see by the heading, that birds are, as Dr. Bennington mentioned, birds generally are in trouble, both in North America and really throughout the world. And it has been pretty significantly quantified in terms of the loss in North America, to the point that a study that came out just a couple of years ago, 2019, documented that we've lost 3 billion birds. So about 1/4 to 1/3 of the birds, well, that's 29%, but you see that range of the birds that, if you had been alive in 1970, are no longer here. And the causes of that decline are many, and I'll go into some detail about them, but again, focusing on the window bird issue. Another important paper that frames this issue for you was a 2014 paper in the Condor. The Condor and the Auk are the two peer-reviewed professional ornithological journals in North America. And if you're interested in birds, they're just a remarkable resource for your use. But there was an article that appeared that you can see bird building collision in the United States, estimates of annual mortality and species vulnerability. And the authors tried to really quantify, I think for the first time, just how big a deal is it of birds flying into windows in North America. And so they looked at many different studies, and that led them to a conclusion. They really couldn't quantify and say, well, it was exactly 462.75 million. They came up with a range of between 365 to 988 million birds die every year flying into windows in North America, or actually in the United States. Canada's about 1/10 that each year. And the median being, you see, 599, so round that off to 600 million birds die each year. And not surprisingly, given that type of impact, that slide I showed you just before that about the decline, again, the 29% decline, makes a bit more sense. So this is just a different way of saying that, a little bit easier to read. Annual bird mortality resulting from window collisions is estimated to be that 365 to 988 with an average 600. And here's the interesting thing. When I first got involved in window bird strikes about 20 years ago, I had a misperception about the issue, and a misperception that you might have too, that I thought that, well, it was the high rises in Manhattan, you know, the 50, 60-story buildings that were the problem, that birds migrating just didn't see the buildings and flew into them, or if in the fog, they would fly into them. And that does happen. But actually, the overwhelming majority of bird strikes either occurs at your home or low-rise, commercial buildings, like the buildings on the campus here and other college campuses and commercial centers. Right down the road, a little bit east of here on the south side of Hempstead Turnpike, right by the Middlebrook Parkway, is that glass complex that's just got a glass skin all around it. And I've been told that I don't want to walk around it because I'm going to get too depressed, but this time of year, I've been told that it's truly a killing towers for birds flying into it. So it's really the buildings that are just 1, 2, 3, maybe up to 6 stories in height that are the ones that are problematic. And high rises are relatively, a small contributor to the problem. I'm really sorry you can't see color. I've got, anyway. So if you do the math here, you'll see that this amounts on average to 1 million to 2.7 million birds die in the United States each day due to window collisions. And given the size of New York, this is where I just played a little game, did a little bit of math. Given the size of New York State, the presence of New York City and other major urban centers that have a lot of buildings, it's reasonable to estimate that 1/20th of the national mortality involves birds flying at the windows in this state. If we accept this assumption, that means approximately 547 to 1,480 birds die in New York each and every day flying into windows. And in this slide, you can see the results of birds doing just that. This is all during spring migration. We're coming into spring migration now. Probably the highlight of a naturalist's year when birds coming up from Central and South America, many dozens of species, more than 100, will either come to Long Island to raise their young or pass through Long Island. I like to call Long Island a migratory motel for these birds as they continue to wing north into New England or southern Canada. And again, they make the mistake of not seeing a window for what it is, and they pay the price. In the lower right-hand corner is the results of one night in Toronto, Canada. Toronto, where it's located right along the lake, is one of the top 3 worst cities in North America for window bird strikes. To their credit, a bunch of conservationists have come together and worked with government and have begun to meaningfully address the issue, which I'll show you the kind of solutions a little bit later on. But so you can see the impact. So the building in the upper right, I don't know if anybody's familiar with SUNY Stony Brook, SOMAS, the School of Marine Atmospheric Sciences. Well, that's one of the halls at Stony Brook on the South Campus. And you can imagine, you're an ovenbird, or you're a black and white warbler, and you're heading, right, on migration, you're gonna end up raising your family in Massachusetts, so you're passing through Long Island, you're feeding actively, and you're in a tree out of view, and you decide to fly into those trees that you see. Of course, they're reflected in the window, but you think those are real trees. You fly into those windows, and boom, you either get hurt or you die. We have put up many, many hundreds of stickers on that particular building complex. All of the South Campus, we've put up actually more than 1,000 stickers in an effort to try to provide what we call, and this is the one take-home message I hope for a takeaway message, is you have to create visual interference. The birds have to see the windows for what they are. So putting up stickers, or again, some of these other products I'll talk about at the end, is vital if you want to really begin to help solve the problem. I'm really sorry. They're pretty photos on my computer. I want to make the point to you that it is a worldwide problem. Unfortunately, it's not just a problem in North America, but it's throughout the world. And in fact, I know the North American distributor, the key person for an exterior window film that they sell to corporations to, again, make their buildings bird friendly. It's a product called Feather Friendly. And I know the North American guy on it. And so I remember about 7 years ago, he had just come back from South Korea and had been hired to address the problem. South Korea has got a unique problem with window bird strikes. You know, along the expressway here, we've got the wooden, the sound barriers you've seen, perhaps. made from wood. Some places they're concrete. Well, in South Korea, they decided, for better or worse, to have them all be transparent, either with plastic or glass. And so there are just linear miles of this see-through wall that, of course, the birds don't see well. So he was hired, and the company made good money, I assume, putting up just whole stretches of this window film, again, to make the sound barriers visible to birds. There's a great spotted woodpecker in Europe, and again, those are basically corollary to our black-capped chickadees, a wonderful bird we have in Long Island that's in Europe called blue and great tits. Oh, so you can see here, I hope you can be able to read, again, the quantification about what are the different sources of bird mortality. Which are the ones to really worry about, and which are the ones that are less problematic? Well, what jumps out at you, I'm sure, is cats. Free-roaming pet cats and feral cats are by far the #1 cause for bird mortality. And even worse to birds, it's small mammals, shrews, moles, mice, that are the base of food chains that raptors depend upon, are killed each year in North America. And it's been a real contentious issue between humane groups that are understandably concerned about the welfare of these animals and bird conservation organizations that are deeply concerned about the impact those cats are having on wild birds. I think the place where there's, just FYI, ripe for some compromises, some meeting ground, has to do with free-roaming pet cats. And the story I give you is that when I was young, growing up in the town of Smithtown, my parents and our neighbors would routinely let our dog out. I don't know if this is something that older folks have some experience with, but they would let the dog just go out, do its business, and that dog, through the years, impregnated 3 females. I think what parents would have caught on, and then you see and hear the dogs getting hit by cars or just getting into mischief. That doesn't happen really anymore. People have changed their behavior about just letting the dog go out and roam the neighborhood. But we still do that with cats for some reason. My hope is that through time, people's values change and realize that really a cat, for the benefit of the cat, and benefit of wildlife, really should be an indoor cat. So the feral cat colony issue, again, is something that's going to be more problematic, and we've been kind of loggerheads with that. But anyway, so the second cause, at about 600 million you see there, are windows, and then a bunch of other sources of mortality. All the way down to the lower right, you can see wind turbines. A lot of people think that wind turbines are a problem. Well, they are, because any bird that dies is something that we don't want to see. And as we really segue into meaningfully, renewable energy and on Long Island, most notably offshore wind, this is certainly an issue of concern. But by and large, in terms of quantifying it, not a lot of birds fly into turbines, particularly the really big ones that are being constructed offshore. Where wind turbines have been problematic, they're much smaller turbines, land-based turbines, or turbines in California. Like if you've been to the Altamont Pass, cross over that was a real problem area. But anyway, so this kind of gives you some sense about the range. So we're going to focus again on bird strikes with windows. Not all birds fly into windows, and there's been a number of studies that have documented the problem species, and these I've tried to capture are really unfortunately the top dozen or so species that do fly into windows. So white-throated sparrows in the upper left-hand corner. The next one down is a common yellowthroat with a black banded mask. Again, I wish you could see them. They're beautiful, beautiful birds. They are a common breeding bird on Long Island. I would not be surprised if they're in the Hofstra Bird Sanctuary as a breeding bird. Then you've got some thrushes, a junco, kinglets, another thrush, another kinglet, and then a few other warblers, another sparrow, a catbird, which is on the right-hand side in the middle, and right below that is a funny-looking shorebird that is called the American woodcock, and Dr. Bennington was mentioning about a woodcock flying into the windows here at one time. They are a common window bird strike victim. because of the fact that they don't really fly along the shore and stay away from buildings, but they do frequent upland habitats where there might be development. Well, not all birds that fly into windows die, or at least die immediately. So that's a little bit of good news. And you can see that's a female golden crowned kinglet with a golden crown that you can enjoy in the upper left-hand corner. And she's stunned. She probably has a concussion. She flew into a window and is falling down in a crack, and hopefully she will recover. Of course, a lot of birds get predated at that point. They cannot protect or defend themselves or flee, and so they could be easily killed. That bird in a photo at the bottom is the same bird, and that's a bird that I came across when I was putting up the stickers at SUNY Stony Brook, that South Campus I mentioned. I showed you the one building. That's a female common yellow throat. Again, I showed you the male with the black bandit mask just before. That's a female, and I came across her. She'd flown into a window. You look at her eyes, you can see her eyes are closed. She was rocking back and forth, clearly under trauma. And we wanted to finish putting up the window stickers on campus. So I got a cardboard box and just put it over her, quieted her down for and we came back in about an hour, 15 minutes, hour and a half later after we finished for the day. And I took off the cardboard box, and you see her alertness to the right, and she took right off fine. So I think she will be okay. If a bird hits a window kind of at an angle, they tend to do better. If they hit it straight on, it's usually more severe, the outcome. Well, if any of you have taken ornithology and learned about, of course, feathers would be one of the subject matters you'd learn more about. I used to have the pleasure of teaching ornithology, and always got a kick of covering feathers with students and taking out microscopes and looking at the structure, the microstructure of feathers. Fascinating, just absolutely fascinating objects. Anyway, many birds, people don't realize this, so there's just interesting ornithology here. Many birds have feathers that intentionally disintegrate, and they become basically talcum powder, so analogous to our talcum powder we use. And birds use that to help waterproof themselves, and just they preen a lot, right, to clean their feathers. So that it's called powder down. So when a bird flies into a window at 30 miles an hour, all that down comes out. It's just like if you were to take a sock filled with flour and smack it against the window, you'd have an impression. That's what you're seeing. So those are three different bird strikes of mourning doves and owls that have flown into windows. And that's the powder down impression that's left behind. Okay. So what are the two problematic characteristics of windows? Well, again, they're in the title of the talk, Reflections on a Transparent Problem. It's their reflectivity and or their transparency. Typically, they're mutually exclusive. So when a window's got a strong reflection, you really can't see through it. But if it's a window at the time of day, and depending on the incidence of the sunlight, let's say these windows right here to your right were wide open, and this was a room, and then that was a whole bank of other windows, and I was out, the outdoors just to the side of those windows. And sometime of day, there'd be a transparency issues. And so birds like thrushes love to fly through, because they fly through the forest. They try to fly through this, and so transparency could be an issue. But anyway, probably the bigger issue of the two is, again, the reflective quality of windows. And you can see they're in both commercial settings and commercial settings and residential settings around your house. There's a female cardinal that died flying into somebody's reflective patio door window, and then you can see again. You can imagine just how these commercial settings would be a problem. That photograph in the upper right-hand corner is taken not too far from here. If you head west on the expressway, get off at Community Drive. Let's say you have to get stitches at the hospital for some weird reason. North Shore Hospital you go down that hill on your right-hand side, it's the big hospital complex. The first building you pass is the Northwell building. That building is very problematic for window bird strikes, and we've been working with the their main sustainability individual at Northwell to put up exterior window film on the back side of the building that borders against a really important property, the Green Tree estate in Manhasset. Again, so you can transparency against the other issue. And you see how a bird could fly, try to go right through that bus stop shelter windows, or that in the house in the upper left, in the upper right, in the house on the lower right. What a house that is, huh? And then that upper right is a photo I took. That's against Stony Brook University, where about 40 birds died. A flock of grackles, blackbirds, just tried to fly through. Again, they thought they could fly through right to the other side to go feed on the grass. They like to feed in open fields. So they attempted to fly through. To the administration's credit, they then put up these stickers to try to provide visual interference. Again, and I will stress here that the design, they put it looks like birds of prey stickers. That's really not what's important. What's important is those stickers are a signal or a cue to the birds that something's there, something, you know, and so they will not fly into it. And the more stickers, the better. Or the more visual, the greater or more extensive the visual interference, the better. Okay. So now you're all depressed, and you say, oh, can't believe this. And another issue that's affecting wildlife on the planet. Throw up your hands and give up. And I'd say, well, please don't do that. Please stay actively engaged in caring about the only planet that is habitable that we know about in the universe, and do what you can to make it a better place. And so a lot of companies have responded with various solutions to address the issue. I just want to run through some of them. And I've got some products up here on the chair here I could point out as well at the end. Before I do that, let me just quickly point out that about 15 years ago, a couple organizations, the National Audubon Society, and most notably the American Bird Conservancy, really started taking on this issue in a meaningful way as advocates. They wanted a response from Congress. They want a response from state legislatures. They want a response from local town boards and village boards to respond to it. And so they came up with a maybe 75-page bird-safe building design manual. I will not quiz you at the end. There's no quiz today, but I would encourage you, if you're interested in a topic, to just go online, type that in Google, and this manual will come up. And it's got a lot of fascinating information in it. But the notable thing really is that it says that the first 6 stories of a building are the problem windows, because that's where you've got trees and other vegetation that's reflected, right? Once you get above that, like the skyscrapers in New York City, it's either reflecting to the sky or reflecting some other buildings, and so it's not as a problem. Birds are attracted to vegetation because what's in vegetation? Food, the insects or the berries that they depend upon to survive, right? So it's really, if you can make the first, even a taller building, if you can make the first 3, 4, 5, 6 stories more friendly for birds in terms of making those windows visible, you've really taken a major step forward. And again, so this is distilling a 75-page document in just those two sentences at the bottom. And here's a fascinating work. So if you imagine 15 years ago, kind of a weird way to think about this, but 15 years ago, you've been hired by the American Bird Conservancy. We've got to start addressing this issue. We've got to start bringing bird collisions down to zero. I'm very much of an activist, an advocate. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I would start if I was hired by ABC to go to Congress and go to, again, right, state legislature, go to the local state senator and ask them to put in legislation. They didn't do that at all, and they had much better ideas, smarter ideas. Said, well, if we're going to come up with answers, we have to provide answers to this problem. So those answers have to be products; they have to be solutions, right? So what Dr. Christine Shepard, working, and also Dr. Clem at Muhlenberg College, and Christine's with ABC, they built this tunnel And this tunnel's longer than you think. It's a little bit compressed view in the upper right, so kind of a little bit hard to see. But that tunnel's bifurcated down the middle. And on one side at the end is a window, and on the other side is a window but with some treatment in front of it. She let a bird go, indigo bunting or a common yellowthroat, and let it fly towards the those windows. The extent to which that bird would avoid the window product channel would tell her how effective that product was. So the bird would fly towards the window pane. None of the birds died. They had soft netting. Basically, if you know what mist nets are for capturing birds, that a lot of researchers will intentionally collect birds to put tags on them or satellite whatever to try to monitor them for some reason. Anyway, there was netting in front so the birds didn't get harmed, but she was able to come up with a measure or kind of indices for how effective these different products were, and so the companies were kind of tripping over themselves. Well, we want to get tested to get the good old-fashioned good housekeeping seal of approval. They wanted to be able to get that, and so that's what she's done and still does to this day. And there's a whole rating and kind of factors that go into it. So what are some of those products? Well, frosted and fritted glass is extremely effective. I mean, particularly frosted glass. You sometimes see, windows that are frosted. You can't see in them. They're translucent but not transparent, right? So they let in light, but you really can't see an image on the other side. Well, though you'd imagine, like in the upper right-hand corner there, that would be highly effective at preventing birds because a bird sees, again, the window for what it is because visual interference, right? In the lower right, those are dots in that window that are about every 2 inches, both horizontally and vertically. That is about the spacing you want. And that is fritted glass. That's glass that's actually been manufactured to actually have either ceramic beads put on it or more typically just drilled out, very shallow spots drilled in the glass that creates that those dots. And they do that easily with the equipment they have. And that's also very effective. And you see that's also, again, another fritted glass in the lower left, and then a different, you can't really see it, but colored frosted glass in the upper left. One of the fascinating aspects about this whole issue has to do with UV, ultraviolet light. Although I'm just reading there's some evidence that maybe some people can actually see at the edge of UV now. This is kind of new thinking. But anyway, I grew up learning that humans cannot see ultraviolet light. A lot of animals can. A lot of bird species can. We have 3 color cones in our eyes. You learn this, you got cones and rods in your eyes. The cones are for color, the rods are for light intensity. And so we can see blue, yellow, and red. Well, birds have that 4th color cone that can see UV. Not all birds. So anyway, the thinking is the holy grail of this problem, solving this problem is, well, if we can come up with a UV pattern with glass, it doesn't affect our aesthetic appreciation of glass like the fritted dots do or other things, but the birds are still warned. And that's kind of showing what the birds see, this UV glass. And the major company is a company called Ornolux out of Germany that's been manufacturing this. They've put these windows in. Have anybody been to the Jones Beach Nature and Energy Center on the West End? We advocated that they address the issue. They did when they built that center. The problem was that the birds that are migrating there apparently don't see UV as well, and so they still had bird strike problems. They've now put in the exterior window film, and it pretty much have solved it, from what I understand. So, but UV can be part of the answer. UV reflective glass can be part of the answer down the road. And here's just, again, exterior window film. This is just an adhesive film that gets squeegeed onto the windows by professionals, and it has different patterns. Again, horizontal lines, vertical lines, or the dot matrix. All, again, creating a term you're getting annoyed that I'm saying again, but visual interference. Okay. Kaleidoscape is another product. You see that there's no bird in its right mind that's going to fly into that picture windows of that house. And in fact, what Kaleidoscape is, if have you seen it, been in New York City, you see buses that have the advertisements on the front, on the windows and everything on it, and you can't see people on the bus, go along. But if you're in the bus, you can see out. That's what Kaleidoscape is. And there are some companies in some settings where Kaleidoscape's been used quite effectively. For example, National Wildlife Refuges, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has used Kaleidoscape because they really want to make sure that the nature center you're going to learn about birds isn't the source of bird deaths. So, and then tape, decals, you can see screens, netting, and string can all be effective to some degree. Again, trying to see that if you can, I don't know why you can see it, but I don't really see any good decals there. But anyway, we put up a lot of, 4-inch or 2-inch decals, sometimes static cling, sometimes with an adhesive that can be applied to the window to, again, allow for the birds to see them what they are. That tape in the upper left-hand corner is a product that's adhesive. You just put it on the window vertically, and if it's only spaced, and I'm going to show that in a second, really no more than about 4 inches apart, it usually provides adequate, again, visual interference for the birds. Screens are quite effective. If you've got windows at home with screens on them, I'd be shocked if you ever have an issue with birds flying into them because the screen just breaks up the reflectivity and the transparency pretty well. So here's the rule. Again, Christine Shepard's work when she was look at these products really found that birds had to have windows with just this 2-inch distance horizontally and 4 inches vertically for them to be effective, for the birds to try to avoid flying into them and again fly towards that one open window in that tunnel, the wooden tunnel I showed you before. With hummingbirds, it's really 2 inches by 2 inches. Hummingbirds, I didn't show, ruby-throated hummingbirds, unfortunately, are common window bird strike victims. One of the, probably like the 13th or 14th. Unfortunately, a lot of hummingbirds die flying into, because particularly because hummingbirds are really fast. If you've ever watched hummingbirds, they really move pretty fast. And then you could do exterior elements. If any of you go on to a career in architecture, become an architect, I hope you'll consider trying to make sure that facade, the front of the building, is not transparent, it's not reflective, but you can build in elements to make it, again, create the visual interference that allow birds to see the windows for what they are. You can see in the upper right, the New York Times building in the city, they had a problem. So what was their response? They dropped this kind of metal mesh with there and let the whole world know this is the New York Times building by putting that there, and that eliminated the problem that they had. So what doesn't work so well is just single window stickers. If you got a picture window and you put up just one sticker in the middle, 2 inch by 2 inch, it's probably not going to be effective. Is it better than nothing? Absolutely. I'd encourage you if you have just to put up one. But 2's better than 1, 3's better than 2, 4's better than 3. So as many as you can put up that don't bother you, that's great. I've had 2 bird strikes on my house since we moved into this house in Seatuck since 2016, and I've put up on the 2 large windows. I've got 12 stickers on each one, and does it? In fact, it does a little bit, but I've got the peace of mind knowing it's over. My concern for the birds overrides the aesthetic impacts, and knowing that there's no real likelihood that any bird, and no birds have flown into those 2 big picture windows since they put those stickers up. So, and the other things are not really, again, it's all about creating enough of interference for the birds to see for what they are. Noise does not work. Plastic owls doesn't work. There's a building in Great Neck, maybe the most problematic building on Old Long Island, just by the railroad tracks on the west side of Great Neck Road. We've met with the owners about that to bring it to their attention. Dozens of birds die each spring and fall migration, particularly fall migration. It's been mostly kinglets, those the 2 species that you saw before, golden crown kinglets or ruby crown kinglets. Anyway, they hired a company 15 years ago to address the problem. The company said, put plastic owls up on top of the parapet at the top. What a waste of money. absolute waste of money, because that's not going to solve anything. You gotta treat the windows. Okay, so now getting to the end here, the other side kind of the window bird strike issue is really has to do with the ambient light that we have in major metropolitan areas throughout the world, but in the United States, or near we are. Of course, we've got New York City, you've got Boston, you got Philly, again, Toronto I mentioned before. And this glow that is caused or created by the collective lights works to really attract birds. Birds can be attracted to light the way moths are, and with really catastrophic results, because those lights are in dense urban centers that during the day, then once the lights go off, the birds are trapped in places with a lot of glass. And so there's this whole effort you may know or hear about called Lights Out. We're trying, and we're aligned with the whole Dark Skies program. There's a whole movement afoot you may know about, the International Dark Sky Association. We're losing our ability to see the constellations, the planets, and the Milky Way. And I could say that for a fact, again, being a little bit older. I remember on Long Island when I was younger, again, 1960s, I could see the Milky Way better than I can today. And that's a loss. It affects the quality of all our lives, not to be able to connect it to the larger universe and to wonder about our place in it. Or if we just look up and just see a glow. So anyway, there is a real effort about dealing with this issue. There's legislation at the state level that's being considered in this legislative session. And relating to this about lights, again, birds being attracted to lights, unfortunately, each September 11th there's a service in Manhattan to commemorate or to recognize those individuals that unfortunately were lost on 9/11. And so they have these two pillars of light, incredibly strong laser, but not laser, but beams that shoot up upwards. Those white dashes you see, those are birds. They're attracted to it. So New York City Audubon has worked out with them that when the birds reach a certain concentration, they shut the lights down. Let the birds disperse. They're no longer mesmerized. They'll move off in a couple of minutes, and then they'll throw the lights back on. So again, just underscoring how birds really can be attracted to light to their detriment. Government has responded and is responding. So New York City, that's again a dead male common yellowthroat right there on the sidewalk, flew into a window in New York City. New York City, just a couple years ago, passed a new law that mandates that any new buildings or significant retrofits or reconstruction of existing buildings has to, by law, incorporate bird-friendly building design. A major step forward in the issue. Toronto has done the same. A number of cities in California, Oakland has done the same. Santa Clara in California. There's about a dozen cities in California alone with shall we say, a bit more progressive on these issues, have done the same. Again, wearing my Seatuck hat, I lobbied extensively the Central Pine Barrens Commission, which is the commission that oversees the Pine Barrens. Dr. Bennington mentioned about my involvement with the Pine Barrens, and there is a compatible growth area where limited development can occur. So if there's any development that's going to occur there, that has to now incorporate bird-friendly building design. We just got that an amendment to the comprehensive plan in the Pine Barrens just last year, so which is a good thing. So it's happening all over now. And you may have heard about that famous owl in New York City, Flacco, from Europe. Somebody, I think, intentionally released the owl, and it was able to survive for more than a year, flying around Central Park, and then left Central Park and expanded its range, but unfortunately recently died, I believe, flying into a window or flying into a building. Anyway, this legislation called Feathered Lives Also Count, Flacco, formerly called the Bird Safe Building Act, legislation in the New York State Assembly and Senate to deal with the issue. And if this legislation passes, it'll basically do to New York State-owned and leased buildings what the New York City ordinance has done. So If you want to get involved, no harm in you writing to you, whoever represents you in the state legislature, those of you that are New York State residents, to let them know you strongly support the passage of this bill. And I'm happy to talk with you afterwards if you want more information about that. So for more information on the whole topic, I would encourage you to go into these websites. Again, New York City Audubon, or you could also go into National Audubon. The American Bird Conservancy, www.abc.org, wonderful stuff. And then FLAP, that's the Fatal Lights Awareness Program. That's the group, the conservationists in Toronto I mentioned before, that were really the first group of people that took the bull by the horns and started working on it and turned Toronto around from being a killing field to many of the buildings being bird friendly. Also, if you want to learn more about it, there's this Daniel Clem I mentioned before, a professor at Muhlenberg College, one of the real pioneers of researching this topic. He has a thin book, maybe 120, 130 pages, called Solid Air. That's very, very informative about this issue if you're so inclined. So the message to you is that working together, we've already made great progress, but there's much, 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 much more progress that needs to be made. Just think about all the existing buildings, like maybe buildings on the Hofstra campus that may be problematic, killing birds. I don't know. I don't know to what extent it is an issue. I know I have done a work with Adelphi, and Adelphi's got some problems. Again, I mentioned Stony Brook University has definitely got problems. SUNY Old Westbury I've checked out with this. SUNY Old Westbury seems to be okay. Just the nature of the buildings. They don't have a lot of what we call glass skin buildings. They've got, I guess, older buildings with a lot more, concrete and brick and so forth. So anyway. So that's it. And let me just quickly show you a couple of products. Again, this is just the bird tape. I've got a roll of it. And it's just so easy to apply. You cut it into sections, take off the back of it, and just apply it to windows. I've done this, again, I want to say now collectively thousands of times on windows around Long Island. And then there are two other products. This is a product called Window Alert. These are static cling. They're not adhesive, but these go on the outside. They reflect UV light. That's the good news. The bad news is they don't last. They only last 3, 4, 5 years until the elements, the weather kind of deteriorates them. And then another product, which is called a bird's eye view, is a larger decal. The good news about this is A, it reflects UV light, and B, it goes on the inside. So what does that mean? That means you could put this on second, third, fourth, fifth story where birds might fly in that you can't get access to from the outside. So this is called a bird's eye view. So that's really it, and I'm happy to entertain any comments, questions, criticisms, what have you. And thank you for your interest.
Hi. First, thank you so much for the presentation. A question I had was in regards to geese. I work at Roosevelt Field Mall, and there's always geese crossing the road. What are preventive measures we can take? Because I know at the mall, especially during Black Friday, we there may have been maybe 4 or 5 geese that were killed. Just
How were they killed?
by traffic or by there's a bridge that that connects the parking lot to the mall, and I guess one of them ran into the bushes or something, and that was it for it.
That's a whole other issue. You could have somebody come talk about roadkill. I'm involved in one project with Seatuck dealing with roadkill, trying to ameliorate it. We actually put a frog tunnel in out in Middle Island. Quick side, I'm going up on a diversion here, but there's 2 vernal pools, and I went by one night and there's scores, more than 100 dead, crushed frogs. I could smell the iron in the air from their blood. And I worked with the town board at Brookhaven, and we actually put a frog tunnel in with reinforced fences so that they have to go through that. So that's a tough issue because geese do move around a lot of traffic there. There's some way to try to segregate, put up barriers where the people focus on where Canada geese are nesting. Geese
typically show site fidelity. They like to come back to the same place if they successfully raised young, so that you can put some barriers there to prevent, segregate them from the roads and the traffic would be a good thing. I have not seen a herd of Canada geese, or I can think of one case where now waterfowl, that's the group, bird, ducks, swans, and geese. They're not window bird striped pigeons, fortunately. So relating to the lecture, it's not.
The other issue with
You got a roadkill issue, right? I mean, a vehicle. Yeah.
one of the things about geese is they're grazers, right? So what's often attracting them is grass. So grassy medians along roads and things. And if we could replace the grass with a different kind of vegetation, like wildflowers or something, the geese would not be congregating there so much anymore.
That's a better solution. That's why he's the professor here.
That's why they pay me the big money, right? Questions? Anybody else? Questions?
Thank you for coming to speak with us today. I was just wondering, what is some ways we can mitigate the effect that cats have against birds, besides just I guess euthanizing cats?
Yeah, the cat problem really is the magnitude of it's really quite significant. I would encourage people to start to kind of do what I recommended with regard to pet cats, is begin to change mindset. I know it's hard. If you've got a pet cat that, it's 12 years old now, it's been going outdoors for 12 years, you're not trying to make an indoor cat's next to impossible. So, but the next cat you get, making an indoor cat from the get-go, and there's ways to provide access to the outside. I mean, if you go online, you see all these neat, what do you call them? One call it cattle panels. Where you can provide them some access to the outside, but they're constrained. Anyway, the issue about not having euthanized, it's really tough. There's been a lot of focus on what we call TNR, which is trap, neuter, release. That is, if you've got these feral cat colonies, people trap up the cats. They then bring them into a veterinarian's office. They neuter them so they can't reproduce, and then they release them back. The problem is that releasing them back, they continue to wreak havoc on small mammals and birds. So I think you got to try to do TNA, trap, neuter, adopt. And I know that may be a little bit naive given the number. I mean, the number of feral cats that are thought in the United States is several 100 million of them. So it's a monumental problem in terms of its magnitude. But I think that's what we have to do. I think we've got a moral responsibility. Cats are not part of the North American ecosystem. I mean, bobcats are and lynx are, but I mean, the domestic cat is not. And given the number of them, if we release them, you make a decision to release them after you've neutered them. I think that's I don't know, getting on my high horse morally. I think that's the wrong thing to do. I think once you've got them into captivity, you've neutered them, you need to keep them there where they belong, and without the possibility of creating harm to, again, these other wild animals that do depend upon natural settings to survive. So, but I will say it is a really, really tough problem. I used to work full-time for the town of Brookhaven. I used to run the environmental program for the town, and one of the issues that I worked on was trying to bring down the feral cat colonies. We were actually under a mandate with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because we had piping plover predation, a federally threatened species, and we were faced with significant $20,000 a day fines by the Fish and Wildlife Service because of feral cat colonies that had been established in some of our coastal beaches. So it's a real difficult problem for which there's no easy answer. But some things we can do, I think, particularly again with pet cats. So.
It's a problem on the Hofstra campus. We have a pretty good colony of feral cats at Hofstra. The Hofstra cats. It's like one of the things about Hofstra.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
But our bird sanctuary is also a cat sanctuary. And every time I see a dead animal that's been predated by cats, I take a picture of it to kind of keep a record. And it's definitely a problem, but it's hard to say what to do about it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody?
I want to throw out one more thing, and that is, with some emails with Dr. Bennington. Dr. Russell Burke here, I think, expressed some interest, I think, working with Dr. Bennington to undertake an effort to try to quantify the impact of bird strikes on campus. This has been done by a lot of students, college students that are motivated. You want to do something to help the environment, help the wildlife, is to be part of that process. The model I always use is Duke University. Just go into, again, Google Duke University, bird strike issue or something. You'll see what they've done. They're done. They're done at Duke. They did this about 10 years ago. The students, really highly motivated students. They pushed back at the administration. Now, of course, that first didn't want to do anything. They said, no, you're going to do something about it. And they did. They identified five problematic buildings and got results after they did all this monitoring to document the occurrence. So if you go into that, you'll see the monitoring protocol that they used. And if you're interested, working with Dr. Bennington and Dr. Burke, you can perhaps do. It is happening. There's also interest at now doing this at Stony Brook University with one of the professors there. So which is great news. Because it's good learning too, right? It's learning a scientific method. And anyway.
Yeah, so Russ Burke in biology is planning on starting a study, right? We want to figure out, do we have a problem and how big it is, or how big is it? So, and we'll have the support of the grounds department, right? Because those are the guys that are cleaning up around the buildings all the time, and they'll,
And they know.
They know,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So. So if anybody's interested in becoming involved in this, just email either Russ Burke in the biology department or email me, and I will put you in touch.
And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, whatever. You're having lunch in a little while and you say, or dinner tonight, and say, it's just jturner@seatuck.org. Happy to chat with you about this issue or other conservation issues, wildlife conservation issues. Again, I barely scratched the surface on things we're working on Long Island, try to further the welfare of wild animals. So happy to have a continuing dialogue with you.
All right, let's give John a final round of applause here. Thanks, everybody, for coming.